It's the John and Ken Show. We're at Ayers Hotel in Costa Mesa. Later on, trial of the tax traders. But now we're having a debate between the three Republican candidates for Senate. We got Carly Fiorina, Tom Campbell, and Chuck DeVore. And we'll be doing this until 3 o'clock. And I guess we'll go with Tom Campbell now first up. I know there's some disagreement between the three of you on this issue. Going back to September 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed and it looked as if we were on the financial abyss, the Bush administration hurriedly arranged a bailout of the banks, which was continued by the Obama administration. Looking back, was that the responsible thing to do, to dump $800 billion on the banks? And if it wasn't, then what were we supposed to do?
The $800 billion was too much. What makes sense, and then I'll distinguish what they did, was to get the toxic assets off the bank's balance sheets, because under the accounting rules, the banks had to score them as zero, and hence they couldn't make loans. It turns out the Federal Reserve came in and actually did that. So the entire bill that was presented to Congress turned out to be a bait and switch. The Congress was asked to vote for the bailout under this theory that it would be used to buy these assets. And then that same money instead was used to buy General Motors, bailout AIG, bailout Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, and all of those steps were quite wrong. Now President Obama is saying, as that money comes back, because the banks whose stock was bought as an alternative, should be used again as he thinks best. It's not your money, President Obama. It is our money. And under the law, the money, when it is returned, is to be used to reduce the deficit. So here's what we should do. The banks are now have those assets parked in the Federal Reserve Board. They should get back to lending. This notion that President Obama will target individual worthy borrowers sounds very much like Barney Frank, who said to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, why don't you just roll the dice a little bit? Take a chance with the taxpayers' money. He didn't put it quite that way. He did say roll the dice, however, because our hearts are in the right place. We know what is right. No, there is no government substitute for the free market. There should be no bailout. And the free market opportunity to win is also responsibility if you lose. No bailouts. Taxpayers don't owe a thing to those companies that made mistakes and got themselves into this fix.
All right, that's former Congressman Tom Campbell. Chuck DeVore, the Assemblyman.
Well, this is a very key issue where you can kind of tell the instinctive differences between these three main candidates for the U.S. Senate. I believe that the purpose of government is to secure our unalienable rights, not try to protect us from our own greed and stupidity. Now, while you heard some nuance from my colleague Tom Campbell on the issue, he did say to David Frum at Frum Forum that he would have supported the TARP bailout because he didn't see an alternative. And in the case of Carly Fiorina, she was the chief economic advisor to John McCain at the time and was advocating on outlets like MSNBC why we needed to do it. And I think it's very important to note that this hastily crafted bill, a bill that was crafted in panic because Congress had to do something, led to the nationalization of 2/3 of the U.S. automotive manufacturing industry. It led to the takeover of the largest insurance company in America, AIG, and it led to the effective control, whether through stock or through regulation, of more than half of the American banking
Should we have
industry.
let everybody go bankrupt then?
Absolutely. That is the part of capitalism.
Well, what about everybody who would have been out of work? I mean, that would have been...
You have to let capitalism work because without reward, you have to have risk and reward twinned together. Now, here's what was not addressed, and this is the most important part. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have distorted the marketplace. They are two government-sponsored enterprises that never should have been called into existence. And our president put $400 billion of our money into Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on Christmas Eve when all you gentlemen in the audience were probably shopping. So you didn't notice.
Carly Fiorina.
Well, you know, I have been listening to both Tom Campbell and especially Chuck DeVore misrepresent my positions for many months now. I could say that it's taxing my patience, but I don't want to give Tom Campbell an idea for yet another tax increase.
Oh, that's really good.
But let's talk about what really happened during the bailout, and I think it's an example of why we need people in Washington, D.C. who actually know something about how the economy works. The truth is that after Enron a bunch of congressmen and senators in a political panic passed a rule called Sarbanes-Oxley. And Sarbanes-Oxley required companies to mark their assets to market. It was a piece of legislation people didn't understand, and it had unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences was that when the markets were going down and down and down, banks were required to continually mark down their assets on their balance sheet, which exacerbated the crisis. Both my opponents well know that I have spent a lot of time on public television talking about the fact that the bailout failed miserably to achieve its goals. The goals of the bailout of Wall Street was to...
You supported it.
You know, I let you guys talk. Yeah. Maybe you could let me talk.
You guys fight it out. We're here just to create the chaos. Go ahead.
Continue, Carly.
As I was saying, the goals of the original bailout of Wall Street were to get credit flowing again. Credit is still not flowing. Since the bailout of Wall Street, since the bailout of General Motors and Chrysler and AIG, all of which I was very clearly and publicly opposed to, I wrote op-eds saying that any CEO, including a Wall Street CEO who accepted a bailout, should immediately tender their resignation and the resignation of their entire boards of directors because they failed. But since the bailout, almost $1 trillion of credit has been pulled from the market for small businesses. The reason we are destroying jobs in this state and in this country is because small businesses in particular do not have the fuel, i.e. credit, to hire people and to grow their businesses. What we need in Washington, D.C. is someone who actually understands how the economy works, because I've lived in it, created jobs. We need someone in Washington, D.C. who understands how to create jobs. We need someone in Washington, D.C. who understands how the financial system works. And we in particular need someone in Washington, D.C. who has some sense of the consequences of this legislation. Barbara Boxer just voted for yet another piece of legislation. It's called the Financial Services Reform Act. Never mind the fact that that act does nothing to deal with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, which are now under conservatorship of the U.S. taxpayer. Never mind that it does not deal at all with the federal government agencies that failed in their oversight responsibilities. We now know that the SEC not only failed to uncover the Bernie Madoff scandal, but it turns out that their executives making $225,000 a year were watching porn 8 hours a day while we were paying their salary. My goodness, yesterday we find out that at MMS they watch porn on government time as well. What is going on in Washington? The consequence of all this legislation, it's political panic on the part of career politicians like Barbara Boxer. President Obama created a commission to understand the causes of the Wall Street meltdown. That commission has barely started their work. They haven't reported out on their work. But somehow, a bunch of politicians like Barbara Boxer, in a panic, have decided we have to do something, anything. And in this case, instead of dealing with the real problem, getting credit flowing again, instead of dealing with the real problem, perhaps reforming accounting rules, instead of dealing with the real problem and making sure that federal regulatory agencies do their job, they've created yet another huge bureaucracy called the Consumer Protection Agency. We will be hiring more federal government employees. It must be why the Obama administration assumes in their budget that we will be increasing federal government employees by 14.5% a year for each of the next 3 years. This while Californians are dealing with 13% unemployment.
All right, take a break. That was Carly Fiorina,
Former CEO of Hewlett-Packard.
Now think about this while we have this time out, the three of you. When we come back, it's time for some mudslinging. You will have the opportunity one at a time to attack either of the other two candidates. Just pick one that you want on a major issue that you select. So think about it while we take a break, and we'll go in order, and we'll see where that leads. And this will be a discussion. Whoever you attack is entitled to fight back and respond immediately. Okay. So we come back. We're at the Ayers Hotel in Costa Mesa on Bristol Street. As we work our way to the trial of the tax traders, we continue with a Republican senatorial debate between Carly Fiorina, Tom Campbell, and Chuck DeVore.
All coming up on the John and Ken Show. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio.